Good evening, lovely people, and welcome to another Photo Creative Live. Photo Creative is a community of photographers of all levels who come together on a Facebook group for monthly challenges to stretch your creativity and grow your photography skills. If you would like to find out more, please go to the description below this live stream where you will find a link which will tell you all about it. I welcome you to come and join in. So good to see so many of our regulars here. Good to see everybody. Look at you all queuing up. Absolutely amazing. 71 concurrent viewers before we even started, which is absolutely amazing. Please, folks, remember to hit that like button because it helps me and it helps the channel, so it is very much appreciated. Please go hit that like button now, and I might remind you again a little bit later on. So let me get my screen sorted out a little bit, because just before we begin I want to say a few words about being inspired, because I think it's really important for us as photographers to be inspired by what we're photographing, because it will come out in our images. And in order to be inspired, we often need to throw some stones into the pool of life to make things happen, make a few ripples on the water and see which ones come back. Of course, some of them are going to be good, some of them not, but we have ultimate freedom to choose which to pick up and which to leave behind. We're here because we love photography, and because we love it, we want to be the best we can be by improving our skills, myself included. So it's important to go to things and do events and places and put in the effort to be inspired in the first place, because I promise you it will make a world of difference to your images. I am one of the luckiest people on planet Earth, because for 4 years now I have been at the International Photography Festival in Sharjah in the United Arab Emirates, and it truly is an extraordinary event, and I'm just going to take a couple of moments to share a little bit of that experience with you guys before we get into our feedback session for our most recent challenge, which was buildings. So for example, I'd love you to meet Philippe Kabanyayev. Here he is, stood in front of his exhibition, which was a truly extraordinary thing. His exhibition was solely photographs of leaves, but aren't they beautiful? He was working with light painting. Light painting is like you just paint in the light, so the shutter is open in darkness and you have a very fine light, and he would paint the light onto these leaves. Just look at these extraordinary pictures here. Another guy, we did a live feed with Andrew, with his extraordinary exhibition of waves, photographs of waves. It sounds so dull and boring, doesn't it? But when you put in the work, the effort to go somewhere that inspires you, then you will find really extraordinary images. So Andrew lives in the southwest of Australia. Yes, he's into surfing, but the effort he puts into finding these waves night after night after night, often traveling 4, 5, 6 kilometers out into the ocean to be in the right place. How does he find out where these waves are going to be? He uses Google Earth and looks in close to see whether there are little flecks of white in the ocean out off the coast, because those flecks of white tell him there are waves breaking continuously, which means there must be rocks below the water, which means it must be a great place for him to go and find waves. This image completely blew me away. The green flash. By the way, Andrew doesn't do any fiddling about with colours in his work. The green flash, if you've watched Pirates of the Caribbean, you may have heard the green flash mentioned. It's when you get the yellowy sunset light of the sun coming through the blue of the water. Yellow and blue, what do they make? Green. So by positioning himself in the water in the right place, he managed to capture this extraordinary image. I was totally blown away by this guy's work. It nearly killed him taking this particular image. The work of Dan Winters and his project photographing the space shuttle missions for NASA, to hear him on that stage speaking, boy, has this guy done some stuff. The most extraordinary imagery. Finding out how he took those images. I just can't tell you how much it blew me away. The keynote speaker, I've got a thing going on the screen here, haven't I, which I need to get rid of. Let's just get rid of that be with you in thing. Let's see, something's gone very wrong. Let's go back to here. I don't know what's going on here. I will see what we can do about that. Apologies. Karen, with her keynote speech, absolutely extraordinary. Wonderful images of Black Lives Matter rally, and she also has a project called My Superpower Is, which of course, if you've done my masterclass course, you'll know the word superpower strikes a chord with me. Working with kids, getting them to write a little poem about what their superpower is. And one of the things I also love about these people, though they're the finest in the world, they are so humble. This was Karen when she saw her exhibition for the first time. Some of you may know a chap called Mohammed Mirza. He's been on several workshops with me. He has been a long time client, if you like, or student. I was completely blown away when I bumped into Mohammed and said, "What are you doing here?" He said, "Well, you told me to enter into the Xposure Awards about a year ago." I did, and I'm a finalist, and here we are in front of one of his images. Many of you will know Benno Sarajic, back from the early days when we were called Photo Lockdown, when we were doing this to stop people going nuts. He was one of our guest speakers. I may be able to reinstigate having a few guest speakers. If you would like that, please pop into the chat there if you would like a few guest speakers, and I will see if we can get some of them back. Benno, of course, being one of them. I know you loved hearing from Benno. It was wonderful to hang out with Chris Rainier and Olivia McKendrick, his partner. Chris is a National Geographic photographer, and together with Olivia they run a foundation looking after endangered cultures around the world. Chris was an extraordinary photographer who was, he started his photography journey carrying the bags for Ansel Adams, no less. I would strongly recommend you Google Mohammed Mahizen and listen to some of his TED Talks. An extraordinary man who puts so much good into the world, and his photography is extraordinary, as witnessed by the fact he has got 2 Pulitzer Awards. I was also completely honoured and blown away to spend over an hour in the company of His Highness Sheikh Sultan Barak Al Kazmi, who is Deputy Ruler of Sharjah and himself a very good photographer. He's an extraordinary guy, very humble man. He had an exhibition at Xposure, but there was no big picture saying, "I am the Sheikh." There was a very, very humble exhibition, nothing saying it was by him, and it was tucked away in a corner, which to me was a wonderful thing, and I think it says a lot. So we've got a couple of people here saying that they would love to have some guest speakers, so we'll see what we can come up with. I also just noticed someone said there's not that many likes, so please guys hit that like button, because you'll really be doing me a favour and helping out the channel. How long have I practiced pronouncing his name? I don't know, I just sort of thought it would be polite before I went the first time to figure out how to say his name correctly. And he's a genuinely interesting guy. We looked at his exhibition. He asked me to critique his work, which was kind of made me sweat under the collar. And also, yeah, anyway, just wandering around talking life, philosophy and photography. I am a very, very lucky guy indeed to have been there. But my point in talking about this is that in order to be inspired and capture great images, you do need to do things that inspire you. Trust me, you don't need to buy another lens or get an upgrade for your camera or look and see which camera is best. These things are irrelevant. It's like a painter and decorator sort of Googling which paintbrush is best. It's just a tool. You are the creative force behind your images. And if anything needs an upgrade, it is going to be you. So just think on that for a moment. Anyway, You mean another lens never hurt though, Paul? Well, yeah, okay, I get it. You know, some people love a bit of kit. I'm going through the pain of considering buying another camera at the moment because my old Fuji cameras, they're getting a bit long in the tooth and a bit battered. They've seen some hardcore action. And I'm going through the pain of, do I get another Fuji? What do I want out of a camera? This is an important thing too. If you're going to get a camera, ask yourself a question. What do I want from the camera? For example, do I need to buy something with gazillions of megapixels and the most expensive lenses if basically what I do is shoot a few sort of family pictures, maybe a few landscapes when I walk the dog and put them onto Facebook? In that case, probably not. If you shoot sports, on the other hand, then you're going to need something with very high ISO performance and wide open, big aperture professional lenses, because you will often have to crop those images and you need that fast shutter speed in order to freeze and capture the action. These are the things that you need to think about if you're buying a camera. I've been asking myself, what do I need? I need autofocus that is much faster than the camera I have currently got. It's an old camera, hey, it does well, but it's an old camera, so I want faster autofocus. I know I'm not a particularly techie person, but I'm not against tech, which makes our lives better. And of course, there are now presets within autofocus settings, which are extraordinary things, which allow us to tell the camera what it is we want to focus on, let the camera deal with focusing so we can deal with decisive moments, capturing the subject as they pass through that perfect pool of light. Think about composition as we're following the action. Great stuff. Anyway, I am on that and I will give you an update as to what I end up getting. To be honest with you, I love the colours of my old Nikon DSLR. I'm looking possibly at a Nikon Z or possibly at another Fuji X, possibly an X-T3, not sure. But anyway, there we go. So what do we got? Any comments that I ought to address before we get going? And look at your awesome images, because this was an amazing challenge, to be honest. I didn't expect so many entries, and there are some beautiful entries. I wish we had more of the group participating, because it's in the doing that we learn, not in the watching. We've got a lot of people who sit on the sidelines, and if you happen to be here right now and you are one of those people, get out of the stands and get onto the pitch. Come and play the game. Take some pictures. That's what we need to do. So I'm just have a quick look at the comments, see if there's anything I ought to address. Best camera is the one in your hand, says Martin Kemp. Very true, and of course phones are extraordinary things these days. My personal view is that I think one day we may well have a camera which has phone technology in it, but with a great sensor, a great processor and interchangeable lenses, because at the end of the day we're using analog controls, apertures, shutters and ISOs on a digital camera. I don't know, what do you think, guys? What do you think? I would love to see. Please pop your ideas into the comments and I will check back. Anyway, hopefully everyone can see. A few people are saying they've got a blurry view. Yes, good idea, James Barnes. Just try refreshing, just refresh the page. Everything should be good according to my YouTube analytics over here. It says the stream condition is excellent. I've got a big green light, so everything should be good. So once again, guys, please remember to hit that like button. It is really appreciated. If you're not subscribed to the channel, then please do that as well. Now, let's get ourselves sorted out. Mohammed Abbas has just asked, he says he has a Nikon D600. What telescope works for astrophotography? I'm afraid I've never done astrophotography, so I can't help you, Mohammed. I've got a Nikon D600 too. Wonderful old camera, but I've never used it for that. Look at all that. We've got a bit of camera discussion going on here. Right, let me get my screen sorted out. Bear with me for a moment whilst I do that. And we can look at some of your awesome pictures. Where has that gone? Here we go. These things just take a moment. Of course, another place you can come for inspiration is to treat yourself to come on a workshop with me. We've got an awesome one coming up in Morocco. Of course, we've got a 2-day weekend workshop coming up in Switzerland, in Zurich, in April. Just 2 days. Really, really great. Do it is too. We have a day in and out of the classroom with a lake and mountains and cool stuff to practice on, followed by an all-day photo walk in Zurich whilst there is a parade going on. So, you know, that's just 2, plus of course all the others. We've even got a brand new one coming up in Ireland, in Southern Ireland, around Dingle, which is going to be a week long. We'll be going with a chap called Tim, who has been on many workshops with me, and he is super knowledgeable about the area. They're all on the website, so pop over and have a look. Right, I think we are ready. Let's start taking a look at your wonderful work. Nicola, yoo-hoo, Dingle, yeah, absolutely. It's an amazing place, beautiful place. We're going to begin in Tralee, a couple of nights there, and then we're going to move across down to Dingle itself, so we can be moving around and exploring the peninsula for a week. Loads and loads of great opportunities. We've got some good stuff lined up for that one. So, your images, let's see what we have got. There's a couple that came in just a little bit late. Now, it could be that due to time zones and things, there's a bit of confusion. It always says that when the challenge closes for entries, 11:59 p.m. on the 19th of February, this one was. We've got a couple came in on the 20th, but hey, we'll give you the benefit of the doubt there. So let's start. Let's have a look. One. You're one of the ones that snuck in under the wire. So our theme was buildings. It could be any sort of a building. It could be whatever way you conceptualize a building. It could be anything really that you can link to a building, but of course it needs to be a very clear thing. One, you've got a beautiful building here. I get it. The thing is, your photo is suffering a little bit because I think you're just too close, my friend. Look how you're cut off at the top of the building. Yeah, we got those lovely columns, and I quite like the light you found. Those bits of highlight and shade, they always help massively. However, I feel the picture is all just a little bit scrunched up like that, and feels like it's a little bit compressed. Could you have stood further back? I don't know what the surroundings are. I wasn't there. But could you have stood further back? Because if you had also, I don't think you'd have quite so much of this convergence going on. This is where the building is tapering in. You've got a wide angle lens, maybe a phone. I've got no problem with people shooting on phones at all. But if you move back a bit, I think it might have helped some of that convergence a bit, and it would have given us more of a flavour of where this building is. And the annoying thing is where the top is cut off. So just have a little think on that one, and maybe give it another go, because if it's somewhere that you go to down in college in Cambridge, then, you know, go back, have another go, try it again at a different time of day, try it again from a slightly different position, try shooting again from further back. It's not like I'm going to be critiquing that or you've got to hand in homework, but for your own benefit, experiment, try different things out and see how they work. I really like this one from Emma Truesdale. Emma, I think it's really interesting thinking, you know. The foundation of every architect's buildings once started here. You know, you've got this idea of building blocks, and I quite like that. And of course it ties in with my own thing, my advanced photography course, the 7 building blocks of photography, because we build on things. How do I want this picture to look? How am I going to compose it? Is the light going to work for it? What focal length do I need to achieve the look that I want? It all begins with pre-visualizing, and then we build with blocks on the top. So it's a nice idea, Emma, and I like the way you've gone for some backlight, the way the light is coming from behind and the shadows are coming towards the camera. Unfortunately, that backlight is just a little bit too strong, I think. I don't mind the high key look, but there's something not quite working here. I think where it's burning out the tops of the blocks, it's not really helping. But it's a good effort, and I like your thinking, because you've got to think like a photographer before you can actually be one. Good on you, Emma. Here's one that came in just a little late. You see it says February the 20th. I'm going to give you the benefit of the doubt here, but unfortunately I think you put it in on the 20th when I'd actually finished. But I really like this image. 80, I think it's really rather lovely. Now, I know I have just said to one about using a wide angle lens and you get convergence on the buildings. That isn't necessarily a bad thing, because sometimes that convergence works, as it does in this case. Photography is like a river. It's fluid, it moves around, there isn't a right or a wrong, and it changes all the time. It's like, does it work when you look at it? So where I have just said to one, you know, be careful of the convergence, when you're up that close it's really a bit uncomfortable. But if you're a bit further back and shooting with a very wide lens like this, that wide angle lens giving that convergence almost gives it an intimacy, a feeling of you're there. It's like, you know, those buildings are leaning over the top of you. Technically, of course, spot on, bang on exposure. I like the monochromatic look. This isn't black and white because there are some blues and orangey reds going on in there. If you're here, 80, I would love to know, is this a spot colour? Have you sort of removed colour from certain areas and allowed it to stay there? I'm quite intrigued. If it is, you've done it very well. I'm not a spot colour fan, that's just personal taste, but there we go. And as Sandra, a couple of people said, yeah, you got in a little bit late, so I'm afraid I had already been through and chosen the ones that I liked. Got the gleam, got the sky in there. Yeah, Gleam says, gives the eyes a bit of breathing room. Yeah, absolutely. Very valid comments. Let's just ease a little further up. There are so many extraordinary photos of buildings that you guys have put in. Here's another one, David. David Genova. Again, the reason I'm putting this up is mostly because I like your thinking. Technically, again, you've got it absolutely spot on. Exposure's right, you've got some nice colours in there, great depth of field, separating out the plants from the building. I find the thumb in the corner just, or the finger, just a little bit irritating. I know I'm going straight to a blemish, but there we are. Not that your thumb is a blemish, or whoever thumb it is. However, yeah, it's a nice idea. It's a nice idea. I think, again, maybe if you could have been a bit further back and allowed the building to breathe a bit more, so we could see more of the building, so we kind of know that it's the building in the plan. I'm guessing it is because of the windows. But my thoughts are, maybe if you could have given it a bit more space, so the plan is very dominant, and maybe if we could see a little bit more building. But it's a great idea, technically well executed. What more can I say? Let's move on. Rupert Selden. This one really did catch my eye, and I do like it. It is very simple, and there are little things about it that I like a lot. I like the light. I love this highlight from the window, this window highlight on the wall, where the sun is coming almost directly towards us, and though those window panes are more square, it has elongated them in that highlight on the wall. It's got a great, indeed Gleam, it's got a great perspective going on. There are other things I like quite a lot. These little interruptions in the picture, which I find I sort of found later. So obviously we've got the view out of the window to the building beyond, and those windows are repeated in the buildings on the other side of the street. I think black and white was exactly the way to go. Perfect spot on exposure. I like this little square thing going on here. I'm not sure what it is. Is it a picture on the wall? I don't know, but I still like it. Weirdly, one of the things that I think adds to this a lot is this radiator down at the bottom. It's one of those things that some people go, oh, I hate the radiator. Personally, I like it. It sort of brings a touch of realism to it. Now, Rupert, my coaching would be, it looks to me like, this is, I could be wrong. If you're here, please correct me. But it looks to me as though you've done a fair bit of vignetting in post-production, quite a lot of vignetting. And just for my taste, a little too much vignetting, which makes, to me, it look a little bit Photoshop. Please, if you're here, do tell me, Rupert, because I'd love to know, because I might be wrong. But somehow I just think the burning around the edge, the vignetting, is just a bit too strong. Yes, David Mill, you are right. It does draw the eye in very well, but somehow I just feel it's not quite right somehow. Yeah, that's an interesting comment. Who said that? Alan Rees, there's an upright missing in the shadow. What's going on? That I hadn't noticed. Very observant, very good. There is. Now, could it be that this dark area here is something that's hiding it? I think it might be, because the angle of this sort of, is there something here that's hiding it? I don't know. Is it continuing beyond the end of the picture, which we can't see because down here is outside the frame? But yeah, well noticed. Anyway, we're only seeing half the window. Gleam, is that you? Are you really Rupert? It's always very confusing on social media, isn't it, when everybody uses different names. Anyway, let's move on. Let's go look at some more. I will keep half an eye on the chat in case you're here. No, I'm always Gleam. Good. I thought this was a nice idea from Monica Browne, another of our regulars. I do think this is a nice idea. You got some really quite nice pictures, and you've kind of followed a theme of windows and doors, and it kind of works. And they're all individually really nice pictures. Exposures are good. Light's nice on all of them too. They're very colourful. And I particularly like this one down in the bottom right here. I don't know what to say really, Monica. It's a nice idea, good thinking. I'm sorry it didn't go much further for me. Let's see, what else have we got? Oh, there's so many to talk about, and I have to behave and not be here all night. Let's move up a little further. Moira. I like this one, Moira, because I like the contrast between the two different types of building. And this kind of V shape going on with those cranes. We've got triangles replicating triangles. We've got these triangular shapes here in this sort of lamppost. We've got the sort of angled shapes, these triangles at the top of the window, the triangular shapes being caused by the cranes. And then suddenly it's broken up by the far more regular shape of the building on the left, but then we've got the triangle going on between them. I think it's very well spotted, Moira. Again, technically spot on. All the colours are nice, exposure's spot on, everything's lovely and sharp. But yeah, great shot. Sandra Sim, I liked this one as well. I think this is a really rather lovely street view of an old, can't remember what it's called, 15th century timber framed house. And I think your use of black and white is really great. I do like it. For me, I think I'm being strict on you here. I'm being hard on you. Maybe brought that exposure down just a bit, because the front of the building is very bright and white, and I think you could have allowed these shadows to drop just a touch more. But nonetheless, it's a nice image. You've got great depth of field. Everything's nice and sharp. Keep doing what you're doing. I'm going to scroll up a little more and just see, because look at them all. There's so many. Jan, interesting building. A fire brick refractory. Derelict building. Yeah, we like a derelict building. Jan, I think what is not helping you here is light. This is that thing about being inspired and going at the right place at the right time, because I bet this could look very different on a very different day. You've got a very grey sky and very flat light. Now that gloominess could kind of work, and I do like the derelict look to it. I think you're a little close, and again we got this sort of wall bending in. It's weird, isn't it, how in this case that bit of convergence somehow jars a bit, whereas in the other one with the whole big street it kind of added something to it. Also, maybe could you have come back a bit and included more of the end of the building? It's somehow disturbing where that window's cut off. I like the trees. I think a little bit more space might have helped, so we can see this gloomy building looming out of the gloom. but I do kind of like it. Thank you, Jane, for reminding folks, please hit that like button as we go, which would be great. What else? Now, oh yeah, Stephen Laws. I think this is a bit of a different take on it, and I like it. I do like it. There's something about a misty picture, which is kind of nice. Now I know the first thing you see are the trees. The trees are very, very dominant here. But in some way, the mist, I think, adds to the mystery of the buildings. You know, I mean, this looks like a very ordinary sort of a street scene, but there's something, I'm making this up, kind of menacing going on in the background with those gloomy houses in the mist. The mist somehow helps the buildings stand out a bit more. I really do think it's a lovely picture, Stephen. I think it's a great shot. Dan Murray, churchyard in springtime, eh? Where are we? Oh, you're not far from me with this one. West Wellow, eh? I like your angle. I like the fact you've got down low and tried to do something a little tiny bit different with it, with those snowdrops right in the foreground. Again, you've got convergence going on, but I don't think it's doing any damage really. Possibly a little bit on this end wall. Could you move around to the side of it? Of course, in post-production you can correct it a little bit, which then makes it look a little bit more natural to our eyes. But it is still a nice shot. My question, I think, could be, could you have got the lens of the camera actually into those snowdrops a bit more, so that almost like the snowdrops become dominant, a bit like the trees in the last shot, and the church became secondary. But because the church is such a big feature, occupying so much real estate in the image, I think it could still have worked. Snowdrops are a bit shy, look like they're looking down at their photos. Yeah, possibly. Yeah, maybe a few snowdrops real close to the lens. Could be difficult to get it all sharp. You need a very, very small aperture for that, but nonetheless, nice shot. The other thing which I think could have helped, again, is time of day. Look at those shadows. The sun is coming and it's bashing straight into the front of the church. We've got a shadow going on here next to this sort of buttress on the end, but it's making the front of the church look very flat. I can't help wondering how it might have looked had the sun been further round in the sky, maybe coming through between those trees slightly towards the camera. I think that could have helped quite a bit. Nonetheless, nicely done, sir. Let's ease our way back up. Now, Cheyenne Morgan. I always get confused as to who you really are, and I know we've been on workshops and met and all that kind of stuff. I like that. It's different. It's like the Monty Python film where he says, yes, we are all different. I'm not. I love the sky, and I like the colours where I like the paintwork where some ivy or something has been ripped off this building. We've still got little bits of roots stuck around the whiteness of the windows. An abandoned house in an otherwise what looks to be very pristine street. That makes it an interesting building. My thoughts are, now I know we've got a little bit of a branch interfering here, and as many of you know, I do like a twig sticking into a picture, but how about easing back a little bit? Could you have done that? Excuse me. I don't know what was behind you, but could you have eased back just that little bit and given it a bit more space? Because that sky is awesome, and the moodiness of that sky totally works with that house, and I think having a little bit more of the pristine houses either side could have helped emphasize just what an abandoned building that is. But again, exposure's spot on, everything's lovely and sharp. You know, what more can we say? Jules, no, there was no more space. What we need as photographers is, of course, construction crew with us, with a bulldozer, chainsaw, all that stuff, so we can move stuff out of the way. Never mind. Nice effort. I do like it. And of course, well spotted. Let's scroll up a little further. and see what we have now. Oh, it's just so many, isn't there? There's just so many. Mary Sue Voth. I liked this one a lot because it's a very subtle take. It's obviously a building, but I like the way what you've actually photographed is the play of light and shade within the side or on the side of a building. The photograph is of the shadows, but you're giving us hints as to where those shadows are coming from, and I rather like it. These kind of slightly ambiguous patterns in the foreground. We know where this railing is coming from because we've got just a hint of it over here. We know what's causing this shadow because we've got just a little hint of an overhanging roof up here. The pop of blue, yeah, does that help? I don't know. I guess I think it probably does. But to me, I think it's really quite strong because of the shadows. I would possibly have been tempted to up the contrast just a touch, but that's me being very, very picky because I have got my photo coach head on, and it's no good if I don't start being picky. Margie Wright Jones, this is an interesting take on building. Is it a building? Is a bridge a building? I don't know. It's certainly a structure, and it's an interesting one. Now you've got an incredibly strong leading line, and you've been very, very bold positioning it right smack in the middle of the frame running forwards. You've got it technically spot on. You've got some lovely light going on in the bridge. I quite like that hint of tree on the left, and if anything, maybe would have liked to see just a touch more of it. The way the glittery rail is picking up the blue of the skyworks. I'm just wondering, now it's a very brave thing to put that rail right in the middle. I'm just wondering if it mightn't have worked if you'd brought it slightly to the left, out of the corner a little more, so we saw a little bit more of the rail on the right. But again, I'm being very, very picky. It is an intriguing photograph, and I like the way you've thought slightly outside of the box and gone, yeah, bridge, that's a building, it's a structure, looks like it's made of concrete and blocks and stuff like that as well. Yeah, I agree, Paul, because it can be a bit dangerous getting onto a railway track. This doesn't have a live rail from what I can see of it, but it is a track that's in use because it wouldn't be shiny if it wasn't. Still, Margie is here to tell the tale. Lovely bit of abstract going on here from Paul. The Marriott Marquis at Blue Hour. I get it, hence the little piece of blue being picked up from out there. You got a good eye, Paul. You always have had, you know. Paul's been on workshops with me and stuff. But I love it. It's like a rib cage of some gigantic creature with that spine running down through the middle and those repeating patterns. I kind of like the position of those elevators as well. It's one of those pictures, these images you've got to think about just a little bit. Now Paul's got his composition very carefully put together. Look at it. We've got the central spine, and it really is central. Nothing is out of kilter. Everything is all geometrically lined up and perfect. Exposure spot on, all that stuff, as you know you'd expect. I mean, if you can't get the exposure correct yet, then you know you need to go and have a go at my masterclass, because for a few pounds we'll sort all that out for you once and for all. Learning how to use the camera, have an understanding of light and composition. For me, that is all beginner stuff. That is all start of the journey stuff. And then once you can master that without having to think about it, that's when you can start to get creative and notice the world around us, because we can't be thinking about that little bit of blue coming in at the top and getting all the composition geometrically perfect if we're worrying about which aperture or shutter or ISO to use, or that kind of thing, or what kind of light works. Building version of whale ribs, says Michael Isles. Absolutely, I totally get it. I totally get it. I love that one, Paul. And of course, this and others already that we've looked at have been in and out of my chosen folder. This was a super tough one to go through and choose my favourite. And it is purely a case of whatever we come to at the end of this is just my favourite images. This isn't a competition. It is a challenge to get you guys out there practicing. It's a bit of homework, being given a theme. Right, how can we photograph that? How can we interpret it? Simple little things can work so very, very well. Let's scroll up a little further, just look at a few more of these really rather lovely images. Terry, what have we got going on here? I find this intriguing, and Terry, I think you're going with the blues here. I could be very, very wrong. I think you're seeing, you know, that connection of the blues. Now for me, it doesn't quite work, simply because the blues are different. The dominance of the truck, that 4x4, I think is just a little bit too strong. Now the lines on the car park floor, I think they kind of work against this extraordinary set of windows on the building across the street. I think that is very interesting. Question, Terry, did you kind of try shooting square on, you know, framing just like 6 windows, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, or you know, 7, 8, 9 as a square framed between, you know, the uprights? I think that could have been quite interesting as an abstract, because those windows are all just slightly different. And I kind of like it. Could you shot them square on, because you're right in front of them, therefore you wouldn't have to, have I got a camera lying around? Not really. You wouldn't have to tilt the camera up to look at them, so everything should have been all nice and lined up and square. Great effort. I like the way the lines are coming in from the left, spot on exposure. Obviously the colours are nice and subtle, and to me that kind of works. Personally, I find the truck just a little bit dominant. What do you think, guys? Let's do a little test here. How about if we get something, I'm going to use a grey cut. I'm just going to close one eye and slide it across the picture and lose the truck. So we've just seen that building through that mesh. We got just a hint of the lines down the bottom. What do you think, guys? Use your hand, something. Try it. What do you think? Because this is just my opinion, and there's only one person in the world we have to please when shooting images, and that of course is ourselves. I think if you just take off the truck and stop it at this upright here, just take it off from there, I think it becomes a bit more intriguing. In fact, I might even go to the next upright, because if you crop to that one there with your card or your hand or whatever, you're losing the strip light on the ceiling as well, which I think frames up and emphasizes those amazing blue windows on the other side. What do we got? Let's look. We got lose the truck. I like the truck with the truck, but level the windows on the left, lose the car. Interesting part is the left part. I would be slightly lower. Yeah, I would agree actually, Martin, because if you were slightly lower, you could have tilted the camera up a bit. You wouldn't quite have that bit going into the corner. But hey, we're being harsh on you, Terry. It is interesting. Yeah, I'm not so keen on the strip light either, Alec. But hey, this is the thing. It's all, you know, learning, trying things, trying stuff out. And you, Terry, and everyone else who's got an image in here, you're on the court. You are playing the game rather than watching from the side. What else do we have going on here? Let's just ease into a few more. Iggy. Enough buildings for you. Yeah. So Iggy, I think you got just a little bit too much going on in this one, my friend. Now, shots like this can work very, very well if you've got a pool of light just picking out one particular part of the image. So let's say there was just a pool of light hitting this large building here, or just any area, any one or two of these buildings, or just this little bit in the middle, these apartments. They're different. If there were clouds in the sky and pools of light moving around, you had a pool of light just picking out one area, and I find this quite intriguing. I quite like the laundry hanging up on the balconies. That would have made it work really quite well, I think. but the viewer has a little bit of trouble knowing quite what to look at because there's just a bit too much going on. The pool of light would have woken it up. You've been careful with your composition, I can see that. All of your uprights are nice and straight and spot on. Maybe a bit more sky could have helped. But also for this one, you're a little bit underexposed. It's all just a little bit dark and flat looking. But nonetheless, again, good on you, Iggy. You are someone else who comes in and you give it a go and you get better each time and you keep working on it. So, you know, you are one of the 1% that actually gets off the sofa and does something. So good on you, my friend, and I hope the feedback is of value to you. Got to be careful I don't shout out anything that I've got in my selection towards the end here. As I'm going through, I have done it a couple of times. Rachel Wells, that's an interesting building. It's actually very similar to an image I've got of an abandoned building out in Vietnam when we were doing a workshop over there. Cambodia, actually, I think it was. National Trust property, Northamptonshire. Very interesting. Good on you going out on that misty day, because misty days and buildings, they're kind of best friends. My feedback, my coaching for you, Rachel, is again, probably in this situation where it is misty, don't be afraid to give it a little bit more space. Move back just a little bit more. Let the building breathe, because there's all that mistiness around it. Now, of course, I don't know. There might be a bright yellow council truck parked just to the right of it, which of course you don't want. But you have got this shell of a building in the mist, which is kind of mysterious and intriguing. The other thing is, somehow it's not quite level, and I'm not quite sure why. Something is distorting here, because looking at your horizon line, it is straight, so I'm not quite sure what's distorting. I think it's because you're a bit close and you've got a wideish angle lens. Just having a look. Did you shoot it on a phone or something? No, doesn't say so. No problem with phones though. Yeah, I think Jan, as you just said, maybe a little more sky. I don't mind the grass. You could take a bit of grass off. Let's get your cards, see what you think. Let's try these suggestions out. I'm just going to take off maybe 50% of the grass foreground. Yeah, I think you're probably right. But I think overall just a bit more space, because we can tell the building is big and imposing, and I don't think it hurts to let all that greyness surround it and frame it up. I think it would actually intensify it a little bit. But again, good on you, Rachel. Good on you. I thought this, Andrew Lovelock, I love your colours and your symmetry. I did come back to this a lot because you put a lot of care into photographing this. You've got some really nice light. I love the way it is cascading. The image, the composition is cascading down these balconies. The way the light is kind of following it in this V pattern. The way you got, you know, these orange bollards. Everything is very precisely placed. You really took care with this composition. The very wide angle lens again is causing distortion, but in this case it's working. Such an annoying thing when you're learning photography. 1 minute a wide angle lens and distortion isn't good, and the next minute it is. I know it's infuriating, but it's one of those things. Yeah, very, very nice shot. Now, of course, I think you know what I'm going to say. We've got a beautifully illuminated horse's arse here. Now, it's a real difficult one because I don't know. Does the light come round a little further? Could you have done it at a different time of day? Would the horse's face have lit up? Because that would have really made it pop. Would it work just a little later? Would the whole horse illuminate? Maybe it won't. Maybe there are buildings in the way causing shadows that I don't know about. But nonetheless, it's, you know, your composition is spot on. Your exposure is spot on. Everything is beautifully sharp. You've thought about depth of field, you know, how to make sure everything is sharp. Although with a wide angle lens, you've got tons of depth of field. So, you know, I'm kind of intrigued as well by the guy in the doorway. I quite like human figures in pictures. What do you think, guys? Because I know some people hate having people in their pictures. Yes for the man in the doorway. That's a Y, or no, N. No for the man in the doorway. What do you think? Just chuck it in there, a Y or an N. I'm intrigued by the man in the doorway because he's not dominant. You kind of notice him last, and it's almost like I can almost feel him going, "Oi, what are you doing?" Maybe I'm making that up. Well, of course I'm making that up, but shoot between the horse's legs. Okay. No, he has no importance as a net. Lindsay doesn't like the man in the doorway. Lots of people do. I'm not a fan of flash. This needs it. That is a good point, Martin. Yeah, maybe just a little touch of off-camera fill-in flash. Now we're going into a whole world of buggering about here to bring an off-camera flash off to the left a bit, just to puff a little bit of light back onto the horse's face. It would have made a difference, but of course we are moving into another world of messing about. But it is a great suggestion, Martin. Now, we've got not that many interiors, but it's always nice to see one. Sue, Owen. Churches and places like this, they are quite extraordinary buildings, aren't they? And they often have some very intriguing and interesting pools of light going on inside them. So good on you, Sue, for, you know, thinking a little bit outside the box, thinking, well, let's see a building from the inside, not just from the outside. There is some really rather lovely light going on in here, and I like the way it's picking up little things around the building, like, I don't know what they are, these little incense burners, whatever they are, dangling up there. Little highlights on these angels on the side. There's another one here. It's a great shot. It's nicely exposed. I think you could have possibly brought that exposure down just a touch because the highlights on the floor are very bright. Maybe had you exposed a little closer for them and let the rest of the church go a little bit darker and more moody, we'd still have had those few little highlights sparkling. I don't mean to throw it all into silhouette. No, no, no. But maybe let these highlights breathe a bit more. Just take that exposure down a bit so this area wasn't quite so burnt. We got the rim light on the, I can't remember what it's called. It's not a pulpit, it's not a fulcrum. Is it a lectern? We got that rim light around the eagle here, which is kind of nice as well. The other thing, Sue, is I'm just wondering, as the sun moved through the sky, lectern, thank you, Barry, as the sun moved through the sky a bit, if this highlight was coming through the lectern and you let everything else drop down a little bit further, that I think would have really, really popped, because then we would have had a relationship between the window, the highlight on the arch here, and the lectern. We'd know where we are, and then the rest becomes a little bit more mysterious. This is where the controlling your camera bit comes into it in a big way. Yeah, it's another possibility, Jos. You know, if you're shooting raw, you might be able to bring those highlights down a bit and possibly add a bit more contrast too. Not everybody shoots raw, and I'm not saying you have to. You are very, very welcome, Sue. Thank you for playing the game, getting on the court, giving yourself a challenge to do stuff. I need to move on, don't I? This is very, very colourable. Donald Johansson, you have produced some really interesting images over the period that you've been part of these challenges. This one's quite different to many of those that you've done, and I love the colours. You know, you've spotted something really colourful, and it looks to me like you've cropped or shot in such a way there's something really interfering at the top here. I do kind of like it. On my screen it looks just a little bit too bright. I'm wondering, could you have brought that exposure down a little bit, which would have just helped make those colours pop that bit more. Nonetheless, it's a really, really lovely shot. I think you know this because we've seen your work before. The light isn't really doing you that many favours because it's coming pretty much from behind the camera and it's flattening things out a bit, maybe earlier or later in the day when it's washing across. But hey, maybe you weren't there, you know, it's one of those passing through things. But nonetheless, I love the colours. and I like the way you've done it. I just think maybe the light could have been your friend a bit more. And it is such a ball ache, you know, when you're trying to photograph buildings, you're trying to get the light to work and all of that stuff. It ain't easy. It really isn't easy. What else have we got going on here? I need to just... Hervé. I like this one. Now, we looked at the leading line on the railway line, which personally I just felt it might work a bit better to the side. We've got a really powerful and dynamic leading line going on here. And to be honest, very often powerful and overly domineering leading lines don't work, because the shot becomes about the leading line rather than the place it's leading you to. You've got to be a bit careful with these rules of composition. But in this case, that leading line is part of the image because of the shapes and the reflections. It is bringing it all together and delivering us up to Canada Place, where we've then got these interesting shapes, repeating patterns going on all over the place. We've got a dynamic line, and it's not just going to the middle, it's going boom across the shot. I kind of like having these few people on the walkway as well. It kind of gives a sense of place and a sense of scale, but that's me. I do kind of like having a few people in an image. Exposure's spot on. I think the contrast just about right. Yeah, it's a great image, Hervé. Hervé, I should say it right. Again, good on you for getting out on the court, kicking the ball and giving it a lash. What's time? Oh, it's that time. I'm going to move on just a little bit further. Now, we've got Michel Dana. That is such an interesting place. Vortex Brewery in Basel. Of course, I forgot that's where you live. I'm going to be down near there soon, aren't I, when I'm doing the Zurich workshop. Might even pass through Basel. Not sure how long I'm going to be there, but I might visit a friend who lives in Mulhouse. I love these shapes. This is an extraordinary thing, because you kind of got this old-fashioned brickwork, this oldie-worldy brickwork, with that sudden smack of clean modern going on in the middle of it. Amazing shapes. I think you're in just the right place. I really like your composition. We've got a little bit of that distortion going on, which is leaning things into the middle. If you're shooting raw, I'd be tempted to see if you can reduce it a bit in post-production, just so it looks a little bit more natural, because when we look at things like this with our eyes, they don't do that. Our brains correct that distortion, but a camera can't do that on its own. The other thing is if you can get a little higher. Now, I'm being picky on you, Michelle. Also, flagpole being cut off, I just find a little bit annoying. I'm being picky. I'm being your photo coach. But it is a really interesting image. Now, one of the difficulties here, of course, is light, because I don't know when or if you get light falling down into this place, and if you do, is that light right above and behind you, and does it just kill the shapes? Because that side light is doing a wonderful job up here, just making these patterns and shapes just come to life. It's a tricky one. I don't know what to say. I think maybe in post-production again you have lifted the shadows a bit, maybe just increase the contrast in the shadow area a bit, because to our eyes it wouldn't be quite so different. But nonetheless, it's a nice composition, beautifully spotted, an interesting image. Nice one, Michelle. I don't know if you're here. Are you here? Yeah, there's Michelle. What does the light do, Michelle? Does it just sort of shine boom straight down there, and then the rest of the time it's in shade from the other buildings? I guess it is. But also when it does shine right down there, maybe you can still catch it just the right moment, so you have just a little diagonal shadow coming across the corner. I don't know, it's pretty dark the way it's wedged between the buildings. Yeah, I get it. Never mind. Nice one, Michelle. Good on you. I'm just looking at my preview. Just tell me quickly, guys, is the video feed coming through okay? I'm not seeing any comments otherwise in the chat. I'm just looking at my preview, which is really, really kind of fuzzly. Okay, we're coming through okay. Good. That's all we need to know. Thanks, guys. Ease up just a little further. Now this, Ahmed Baba's. I do like this. Why do I like it? Well, I love this little kid. I love the delight and joy that he is bringing to the image. Also, you've captured some great colours, because the colours, they're all really, really simple and they're all related really rather beautifully. Now, my coaching here, because it is a great picture, and again, good on you for getting off your ass and going out there and doing it. My coaching here is, because of the symmetry you've got within this frame, could you have moved back a bit and just turn the camera a fraction to the right? Because look, we got 1, 2, 3, 4 domes, 1, 2, 3. Maybe there isn't another one. Maybe I'm making stuff up in my head. I think the exposure could have come down just a bit. It's very, very bright in the foreground. It looks like there's bits down here that are burning out. It's a bit pixelated too, so I don't know what you shot it on, but I'm not going to go into that one. But I do like the repetition of the shapes and the arches and the windows. And I think had this structure been more central and you had the same number of arches either side, and that little boy running through there just bringing a world of joy to the picture, it certainly would have helped. It doesn't look quite sharp, but I'm not quite sure why it looks so pixelated. Maybe, oh sorry, taken on your phone. Right, fair enough. Maybe you've had to crop it, maybe done things. And also, of course, that little kid, you were maybe looking the other way and went, oh wow, look at that, and you've just got to go with it. Nonetheless, well spotted, and I do like it. I think it's a great image, and I think it fits the brief really rather well. Very well, in fact. Lindsay Masal. Another great idea. It really is. It is another great idea, another way of thinking about building. Because look, the hashtag is building, so that could be a verb or it could be a noun. It could be an adjective, I suppose. But I do like your idea. Now, how could we tidy this up just a little bit, Lindsay? I think one of the problems is the light is very, very flat. Again, I've got my photo coach head on, and there's a few too many colours going on around. Maybe could you just nudge, particularly this red brick, just reach in and just pushed it out of the way a little bit, because red is a terribly domineering colour. I also think this might have worked quite well as a black and white. I do rather love black and whites myself. You're very welcome, Lindsay. Thank you for joining in, for giving it a lash. Now, had this been a little closer to a window, so there was a bit more side light, I think the light would have been really good. And it is so difficult with a little person because you can't control them. You really can't, and you've got to be so patient. Your exposure's spot on, and I love your thinking. Would it be possible, if you're going to do it again, to sort of move something closer to a window so there's a little bit more side light coming in, which would have given more shape and texture, and then put the bricks there, and then of course you can't just dump a little person in there. You've got to wait till the little person wants to go there, because they are in charge of the world. Good one. Nice effort, Lindsay. I hope the comments were helpful for you. What's the time? 8:03. We're going to move on a little bit further. I'll stay on a little bit longer for you guys because I was talking about exposure and inspiration and stuff like that earlier, but I do believe it is very, very important. I thought this, Chris Bagnall, this is again a very lovely picture, and I like the way you've been unafraid to let the shadows stand out and speak for themselves. Very interesting building indeed. I like the light coming in. You've got low angled sunshine, which is creating these shadows, light and shade, light and shade. It's always light and shade, and you haven't been unafraid. Now there's still detail up in the top here. You can still see hints of rafters and things, and I rather like it. The people, you've captured them when they're in a little pool of light, so they are popping out from the others that are in shade. And then of course this glorious structure here, perfectly framed within the frame of that arch. repeating patterns running through. I'd say your exposure's spot on, your colours are really nice, and you've obviously taken a lot of care with that composition. David Mill, lovely contrast. Absolutely, I do agree. So that's great. No, lovely picture, Chris. Forgive me, I'm going to move on because I've been waffling a lot. Michelle Lorraine, what have we got going on here? Now that's an interesting view of the Shard. Right, you're somewhere behind the Tower of London. I'm going to be up there soon, guys. You want to join me in London? We're doing a Cameras Don't Take Pictures. It's an all-day event. We've got a bit of a classroom seminar session in the morning with some wacky, silly exercises for you to do. Then we'll grab a bit of lunch, and then we're going for a photo walk all round here and across Tower Bridge, all that good stuff. So pop over to the website. There are links below. Go to the workshop section. Come and join me in London. I would love to meet you. The more the merrier on this one. The more the merrier. We've got a few on board, but come on, come and join in. It's not an expensive one, and it's a good fun day out in London. So Michelle, it's a very interesting angle on the Shard. I've not seen it from this angle. I'm going to look when we're up there. I like the way you framed the Shard between the two towers on the Tower of London. You've obviously thought about it. The light is not being your friend here because you're in full dark, which makes it very, very difficult because it starts to get incredibly contrasty. However, had you managed to get there maybe at blue hour, sort of twilight, it's not blue hour, is it? It's more like blue 10 to 15 minutes. But then I think you'd have found that the available light would balance more with the light in the top of the Shard here. And I think it would have just helped it work. The other thing is this could work quite well in black and white because we've got some strange colour casts going on. We've got the yellow sodium, I guess they are, lights of the Tower of London against the colours of the Shard. Black and white can work quite well for things like this. I'd have been tempted to maybe see if I could give it a little, lose just a little bit, just a hint. Maybe just 50% of the wall in the foreground. What does it look like? Yeah, maybe. Also, it doesn't look quite sharp. Now, I know you're in the dark. You've probably got a very, very slow shutter speed. Hey, Michelle, you're there. You were about to head home when you spotted this. Good on you for giving it a lash and not just scurrying off home. But here's the really cool thing. If you live around there or you're there again, you can kind of go back and build on the idea. Personally, I often find if I'm somewhere and I see something and I take a picture and yeah, it's okay, it's not bad. But it's always worth a second visit because we start to understand the location just that little bit more and we can build and improve upon it. It was on a tripod. Okay, Michelle, is your tripod a good sturdy tripod? I know I bang on about this. But if you have a plastic head and it's a little bit breezy or you touch the shutter button, it can be enough to make the picture blurry. And I know they're a pain in the arse because you want to, carbon fiber is expensive, but it is very sturdy. Whereas like the one that I use, this one, I don't know if I can even show you. I don't know if it'll fit in here. This is my lightweight tripod, which is in itself quite heavy, and people say you're nuts lugging that thing around with you, but the thing is it doesn't usually wobble. There is a video on YouTube which I think I put out about a week or so ago where I was on top of a hill in a howling gale, and even with that heavy tripod there was a wind and the shots had got just a bit of camera shake in them. Tripods are a strange thing. It is, but I also thought it was not quite sharp. Yeah. Anyway, you know what the thing is, and I hope the feedback and coaching was of value to you. I'd love to see you do it again, see what you come up with. So where are we? It is nearly 8:10. We're nearly at the top, so I'm just going to go fairly quickly, and then we will look at the ones that I feel kind of stood out. Oh, there's so many that I could just talk about. I mean, look at all these wonderful pictures. I really like this one, Darren Sangster. I do really like that. it's just a different look at the Old West Pier in Brighton, and I love the fact you've got a photographer in there, so perfectly positioned, so symmetrically in the middle. I do really rather like that, Darren. I think your exposure could have come up just a bit. It could be just a bit brighter, even if it was a bit of a dull evening, but nonetheless, I like it, and it's a different take on that whole theme of building. I'm going to very quickly shout at a couple more. Philip Gray, because I like this one too. Look at the light and the patterns and the shapes. I do like that. And you've got all those difficult verticals pretty much straight. They're not annoying. Do you know what I mean? They're not like adding to it. They're not subtracting to it. They're kind of unnoticeable. And that takes a lot of doing when you're photographing buildings. But I do like the light, these little bits of light. There's a little bit of light flicking down here. I like the repeating patterns and shapes and the way you're leading us down into this street with these interesting steps and shapes. I like the repetition here as well of these white steps or handrails. I mean, I'm kind of intrigued by this. Is this frozen? Are you here, Philip? Is that frozen water? Are we looking at frozen water, or what is it? It's an intriguing place no matter what. Oslo, I think we got, these are tie-ups for boats or something, but whatever. It is a cracking shot. Well, oh, there's just so many. Bear with me, we're nearly at the top now, guys. We're nearly at the top. Another fascinating piece of photography, and it's just so beautifully composed. John Colony, you've got a lovely swoopy composition here. I like the way you've thought about it, and again, you know, you probably had to shoot with a wide angle lens, but it works. The wide angle lens is taking those swoopy curves and sort of scooping them up, magnifying them, which is really kind of works. And I like the way you've been brave and let it go a little bit dark and a little bit moody. We can see that sky coming in through the skylight. It is a dramatic shot. So let me have a look at your comments. Ah, right, so you're on a ship. I thought it looked like it was on a ship. Yeah, I wasn't sure if it was a ship or a hotel. So you're on a cruise somewhere. Interesting image, nicely done. And yeah, I would imagine it would take a while to catch it without anyone on it. Mind you, I think if you had one person in just the right place down here, I won't go on because you know I kind of like that stuff. Teachers pay, see, adding people into pictures, thinking you'll get a shout out. Anyway, guys, you have every single one of you who has entered this, I totally salute you. I think you have truly done an amazing job here. Now bear with me while I just sort my screen out. Where are we going? Let me get myself. Here we go. We are on the right path. And so this takes us to what I chose to be the ones that just stood out at me. Please do not think these are winners or losers, or you're a loser if you're not in this category. They're just the ones that shouted at me, and I'm going to do my best to try and explain why. So, our first one. Let me just get my screen sorted out. Forgive me, I've got so many windows open here that I can't really see what I'm doing. Now then, our first. I just really loved the quiet of this. There is such a peaceful sort of a charm to this image by Marcus Dressler. I think that's how we pronounce it. I don't know if you're here, Marcus. But it has got a quiet, peaceful sort of a charm to it. We've got that gentle light. The exposure is spot on, and I think it's very, very carefully composed. Just using those few gravestones in the foreground, and notice none of those gravestones have been cropped off. They're just nicely just settled within the frame. I think the ratio between sky and ground is very nice, and I like the fact the church is off over to one side, so we really get a feel of where we are. I heard someone recently at Xposure say, what's the point of taking a beautiful photograph if it doesn't say anything? Which I thought was a very interesting concept. And I think this does say something. It says something about where we are and what time of day it is, and possibly a little about who the people who visit this church might be without actually seeing one. Who said that? Yes, Jane Kilbride. I completely agree. I do think it is a very beautiful photograph. So the next one, which I kept coming back to, was from Linda O'Neill. I love the shapes. I really do. You've really thought about where to stand to make this work, to make it sort of line up with these twisted tall towers. Exposure, of course, is spot on. I think black and white was exactly the right way to go. The way the light is playing on the repeating patterns of the building. Yes, I know some of you may be thinking, well, that's a bit like the one you put on the album cover. I would agree it is, but I just think this one is actually a lot better than mine. Look at the way these patterns swirl and repeat, the way these 2 points of the towers, they're kind of opposing but not opposite each other. I reckon you probably shuffled around quite a lot to get that to line up exactly the way you wanted it, Linda. You thought about, you've got a wideish lens and that works well. Obviously, Linda has thought about apertures. The superpower of an aperture is it's the primary control for depth of field. So, we've got everything nice and beautifully tack sharp. Next one on my list, which again I kept coming back with, and it's another different view because it's one of the few interiors, was from Kim Goucher. I really like this one, Kim, and again, you've been so careful with your composition, and I love the colours. Red is the dominant colour, and you've used it to great effect. Notice how the light is falling down. All those lights on those balconies, they're kind of dropping light back towards Kim, and the light is wrapping around this sphere of red, this shade, this lantern or whatever it is, in the most beautiful way, just sort of wrapping it around. We kind of go boom into the red lantern, and then we go off up through the hallway. I don't know what it is. I'm guessing it's in a hotel or something like that. Let me just have a look on my other screen so I can see it's a bit bigger. Celebrating Chinese New Year. Right, I get it. I don't know if you're here, Kim. I think I saw that you were. If you are, I'd love to know, is this the foyer of a hotel somewhere? But nonetheless, it takes a bit of doing to spot it, but also, again, you've been so careful with composition. Look at the top of that sort of, it's not quite, is it octagonal piece in the top of the roof? Look how perfectly aligned it is. It's not slightly on the skew, it's not at a slight angle. And again, you probably haven't got a lot of light to work with there, so you've had to be very, very careful with using ISO and shutter speed, or maybe again, shooting on a tripod. But the main reason to me as to why it works is the light. We've got composition and light, the two most important things in all of photography, and it's why controlling the camera subconsciously, without even thinking about it, is so important, because you can't notice and work with light and composition when you're worrying about which shutter or aperture to use and stuff like that. Right, our next one is another kind of abstract shot, and I just think it's really quite extraordinary, from Annette Vaughan. I really like your positioning. I'd love to know where you are. You must be in another building looking in this direction, Annette. I like the way these two extraordinary structures, the light is just nice. I think black and white is just the way to go. You've also managed to capture it at a time when the sky itself is almost mirroring the repeating patterns on the building. Now, okay, maybe Annette did the cloud dance and got the sky to do it, but personally I doubt it. But it is one of those things about being in the right place at the right time. Sometimes these things happen, sometimes they don't. Now, it's a subtle thing, But I have to ask myself the question, would it have worked quite so well if the sky was just flat or plain, or maybe had really clearly defined fluffy white clouds floating around in it? Paul Trively just said, this is the photo that made me think I'm not in the running this month. Oh, mate. But it is a great shot. I love the contrast you've got into it. I think it's absolutely right. Strong black and white contrast for these strong structures, which look as though they're either in some form of confrontation or maybe having a conversation. But then down the bottom, very, very small, this is a brave composition. We've got this little tiny bit of the buildings on the beyond. And I think that is really great. This thing about where are we? Say something about the place, because let's just get your bit of card, get your whatever it is, use your phone or your hand. I got told off by a friend of mine in Switzerland for using my phone. She said it looked unprofessional, so I've got my grey and white card out so I look professional. Let's just slide this up and take out those little houses that are beyond and look at it then. What do you think, guys? Personally, I think it loses something. What do you say? Please, just yes, a Y, yes, if you want to keep the houses in there. What do you think? I just think that little tiny detail makes a world of difference. Yeah, we need the buildings. Yeah, I think everybody pretty much goes, we need those little buildings. This is all about the art of seeing and thinking like a photographer, isn't it? And there, I really love it. I truly do. I think it's a beautiful photograph. We're going somewhere now to something very different. And let me just make sure I've got everything right here. Yeah, that's the one we want. Is from, I don't know how I pronounce this. I'm guessing it's Peter Larsen. I really like it. Again, we've got, for different reasons, two very, very different structures, but very carefully and nicely composed. Even having the parked cars there, to me, lets the picture say something about where we are. The sky, those stars just sort of twinkling out, and yet there's that bit of movement, either in that steam that's coming from somewhere, or maybe it's a cloud in the distance. But the parked cars, to me, actually say something. Now, usually, of course, we're going, oh, I wish those cars weren't parked there. But I think they say something. They say something about night shift, something about working late, something about this place isn't abandoned. There is life here. Something is going on. Yeah, agreed, Sharon. I think there's some really interesting light falling on the building. But just that juxtaposition between those round, smooth greys and that, that sort of more tactile brickwork, I think it just works. And I also like the fact there's that single little light on right in the top above those silos. Yeah, I would agree, Paul. I reckon it must be. Hello, Peter or Petey or Pede. I'm sorry, I don't know your name. Peter, I guess. It's steam from the factory. Nonetheless, really like it. Really, really like it. Were you wishing there weren't cars there, or were you happy with the cars? Question. I'm just intrigued to know, because you are the creator. Peter, thank you, Peter. So did you like the cars, or were you wishing they weren't there? I'm intrigued to know before we go on to our final image. But to me, it just works. I'm going to move on to the next one, and if Peter gets a chance to respond to that, then that's great. Here we go. They are part of everyday life there, so they're fine. Yeah, I totally agree with you, Peter. Absolutely brilliant. Apologies, guys. There is always a lag on this. What I say, you hear, maybe a few seconds later. Okay, so my final one, the one which I did keep coming back to, was from Ken Harmon. I just think it kind of worked. There's something quaint, oldie worldy and interesting, but we've also got some very beautiful light going on here. The light is giving the edge of the building this beautiful shape. It's an interesting building. I like that, just that little bit of greenery in the foreground, or shall I call it greyery, because look, it's a monochrome image. Also, this has been shot with a wide angle lens, but I am pretty sure, if you hear Ken, correct me if I'm wrong, Ken has been very careful about the positioning of the camera and possibly just corrected those verticals a bit in post-production, because if that's taken with a wide angle lens and the camera's tilted up a bit, it will skew and bend. Now when we look at a building like that, it doesn't skew and bend. Post-production isn't a place for fixing things that went wrong. It's a place for putting our final stamp on an image, but also for making things look the way we see them with our eyes, because eyes and cameras do see the world differently. So I don't know if you're here, Ken. I would love to know. Can't see you, but nonetheless, I think you guys have all produced some extraordinary and really rather beautiful images on this challenge. It's been a total pleasure going through them, although it has made my life, of course, very, very difficult indeed in choosing the ones that I like. It took best part of a day going through that, not umming and ahhing and being indecisive, but that's your fault. Good on you. So one last reminder, if you haven't hit that like button, please do it now before we wrap up for the evening. I think this has been a great challenge. There is another challenge coming out on the page within sort of 5 or 10 minutes after we finish this live stream. If you're new here, you're wondering what's going on, there is a link in the description below to Photo Creative. Whiz over there and just refresh the page a few times, because you've got to give me a chance to put the next challenge up. Otherwise you'll be entering the one that we've just done. So once again, thank you all. If you would like to join me in London or on a photo workshop, then please come and do that, because I'd love to meet you. We'll have loads of fun. You'll improve your skills, I'll improve mine, and it will just be magical. If you're struggling with how to control your camera, my masterclass has got so many 5-star reviews. Pop over to Trustpilot. Again, link in the description below. Put in keyword masterclass. You can read them for yourself, what people have said. I can help you with that for a lot less than the cost of that lens you don't need. Be well, people. Thank you for being here. I really look forward to seeing you next time. Take care.